Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Thomas L. Friedman and Jeff Weiner.
Jeff, they just won't go away, okay? It's so great that all of you have stayed throughout the day. It's been such a stimulating conversation, and as I said, it's just going to keep getting better and better, and I'm going to honor that with Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, and a friend, and we were talking that, well, we could talk for about 20 minutes, and he said, you and I have never spoken for 20 minutes alone, so this will be a test before to the Q&A. You know, Jeff, we've, as I said, the theme has been try to look at the whole supply chain. What are the big tech trends going on? What are the new industries that's spinning off? What are the new skills that are being required? What does that mean for post-secondary and then K-12 education? You're sitting in one of the great observation perches in the world at the center of LinkedIn, seeing all of these people connecting resumes and whatnot. What's the new thing at LinkedIn? What are you seeing in the last year or two, different from 3 or 4 years ago about this whole supply chain?
So I don't know that it's brand new, but it's certainly continuing to evolve, and I think there's no end in sight, and that's the widening skills gap. And that's the gap between the skills of the aggregate workforce, and you can take any country in the world, but we can start with the United States, and the jobs that are available. So if you go back, say, 5, 6 years, and you fast forward until today, you'll see a continuing increase in the number of available jobs in this country. So today there's north of 4 million jobs.
And that shows up on LinkedIn in terms of the...
It will increasingly show up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We're in the process right now, it's funny you should ask, we're in the process right now of materially expanding the number of jobs available on LinkedIn. And as part of our vision to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, we ultimately would like to digitally represent every job in the world.
How would that work? It's a social graph, basically, for the whole global workforce?
It's an economic graph.
Interesting. So how would it work?
Yeah, sure. So whereas a social graph is a digital representation of connections between friends and family, and LinkedIn was originally founded as a professional graph, which are connections between professionals up to 3 degrees, which is largely what you experience today on LinkedIn. The economic graph seeks to digitally map, the global economy. So ultimately, we'd like to be able to represent every member of the global workforce via profile on LinkedIn, all 3 billion of them. We'd like to have a digital profile for every company in the world. There's as many as 70, 80 million companies when you include small businesses. We'd like there to be a digital representation of every job available in the world, full-time, part-time, for-profit, volunteer. We'd like there to be a digital representation of every skill required to obtain those jobs. We'd like there to be a digital presence for every university and learning and development asset required to obtain the skills necessary to acquire those jobs. And then we want to be in a position to enable every individual, every company, and every university to share their professionally relevant knowledge with one another, to share their expertise and their experience. And then we want to step back, and we want to allow capital, all forms of capital, intellectual capital, working capital, and of course human capital, to flow to where it can best be leveraged. And in doing so, the hope and the dream is that we can help lift and transform the global economy.
How far away, where are you in that mapping?
Yeah, so the beauty of this is that you asked what's changed over the last couple of years. So one major change is that when we first started talking about this and our vision, I think people would smile and say, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, what's coming next? What's the roadmap for the next 12 months, 24 months? And what's happened is over time, we have now established each of those 6 core dimensions of the economic graph. We have the infrastructure, and we're now delivering against all of them. The question is really just about scale. So today we have 300 million members. There's 3 billion people in the global workforce. There's 600 million knowledge workers in the world. And so that'll be the first stop on our way to 3 billion. We're fast approaching 4 million companies with active company profiles on LinkedIn. We recently surpassed 25,000 universities with a presence on LinkedIn. We announced that our publishing platform is now expanding beyond 500 influencers, people like yourself, professional luminaries, to include ultimately all 300 million members to be able to share their professionally relevant knowledge. So I mentioned a moment ago jobs. So 5.5 years ago when I started, we had between 6,000 and 8,000 jobs. A couple of months ago, we had roughly 340,000 jobs. And now, if you're an active job seeker and you're in a test that we just started to deploy, we're fast approaching 1 million jobs, and that number will continue to expand quite dramatically.
Posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a test,
Right.
so not everyone is going to be in that test.
Yeah.
But that is something that we're investing heavily in, and over time it won't just be about job comprehensiveness, but also job relevancy, and making sure we're getting the right job in front of the right member at the right time.
Who does well on LinkedIn? That is to say, what are the attributes of people who successfully use LinkedIn to get a job, advance in a job? What are the things, the tips that people should know?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with your profile and representing who you are professionally, your professional brand, your experiences, your skills, your ambitions, what it is you ultimately want to accomplish. And that's increasingly how people are finding you. That is how you're putting your best professional foot forward. And for the vast majority of folks, when somebody searches your name on a major search engine, your LinkedIn profile is showing up at or near the top of those results. People who are already in LinkedIn are also doing searches. And so the more you invest in the relevancy and the freshness of your profile, the more likely you are to show up for opportunities. And I'm not just referring to job opportunities, all kinds of opportunities. People that want to connect with you, do business with you, business development, people that want to invest in your company, companies that you ultimately want to invest in, journalists who are doing primary research. I mean, the list goes on and on. And a profile is not just about text completeness like a resume. Our first objective was to ultimately transform and replace the resume, and we've moved past that. And while there's still work to be done there, the LinkedIn profile now is essentially your professional portfolio. So there's
You see my work.
You can see your work. So take a general contractor who previously would have been describing the dream house they just built, and now they can upload imagery. They can upload video. One of the two of us, or both of us, may upload a video of today's presentation, and that's going to appear on our profile. A keynote presentation that you did that you're really proud of that demonstrates your ability, your vision, your company's vision. Those are the kinds of things that increasingly are on LinkedIn, and the vision there is no matter where on the web or in the digital universe you're uploading content that reflect your professional self, ultimately we'd love for there to be a button on every one of those sites, wherever you're doing that, and you can add, at the click of a button, that information to your LinkedIn profile. Also, with regard to your expertise or knowledge, we talked about expanding our publishing platform. And today, when you publish and you click that button to publish something, a best demonstrated practice or a great experience you once had professionally, as soon as you click that button, that's showing up near the top of your profile. That's your expertise, and that increasingly reflects who people are. So it starts with profile completeness and taking advantage of these tools. It also extends to your network. Who are you connecting with? Your current colleagues, your former colleagues, current contacts, people you ultimately want to be doing business with, and building out that network, because ultimately those are the people that are going to open the doors. And it's not just your first-degree connections, it's also your second-degree connections, even your third-degree connections. So those weak ties, those weak connections are the folks that can open doors to you that otherwise wouldn't be open.
One of the things I know you're concerned with is youth unemployment. What's your, from everything you've seen on LinkedIn and everything you know, what's your advice to young people today? Be they high school students preparing for college or college students now preparing to join the workforce?
It's a fantastic question. So taking a step back to talk about what we're seeing, and it's not just on LinkedIn, it's just keeping your eyes and ears open, but youth-based unemployment has long passed crisis proportions in certain regions of the world. You see youth-based unemployment in Greece and Spain north of 50%. North of 50%. One of every 2 kids, students graduating in these countries is unemployed. And it's not just in European markets or countries. In the United States, youth-based unemployment is 2x that of broad-based unemployment. You know, we're still educating our students today for the jobs that once were and not the jobs that are, or most importantly, will be. And there's a lot of work we need to do on a global basis to close this skills gap and to better understand where the jobs are going to be, the fastest growing jobs, the skills required to obtain those jobs, and then equipping our vocational training facilities, junior colleges, higher educational organizations, and universities with that data so they can start to course correct and imagine a just-in-time syllabus or curriculum based on where jobs are starting to pop up.
Just-in-time syllabus, that's an interesting idea.
And that's one of the use cases we're most excited about. If you look out 5, 10 years in terms of the economic graph, the types of things that will be possible, you can imagine picking any locality anywhere in the world and pulling data and understanding the skills of the aggregate workforce in that locality, the fastest growing jobs, the skills required to obtain those jobs, measure the size of the gap, and when the gap exceeds a certain point, you actually send an alert to all of the entities within that locality that are capable of equipping folks that are looking for work there with the skills they need to get the jobs.
Your university is disconnected from the demands of the market.
There's no doubt. I mean, with regard to universities, there's a number of legacy issues, but it's not just universities, it's our high schools, it's our primary education. Code.org and Hadi Partovi is doing this extraordinary work right now, trying to ensure that every school in the country teaches computer science. Every school, like we teach reading, like we teach math. It's that important. And I think if we can get that right in terms of primary school, generationally we'll be in much better shape. But that's going to take time. That's going to take 10, 15 years, and we must be investing in that today. We also need to take care of the people who are unemployed today, or people who are underemployed. There's millions of people in this country who are in temporary jobs, who want full-time work. And then there's the marginally attached. There's people who've been looking for work for so long, they've just dropped out. And that's not captured. When you hear unemployment is now dipping below 7%, low 6%, it's not capturing those two categories. So from a vocational perspective, how can we equip these folks with the skills they need to take the jobs that currently exist? When I mentioned 4 million available jobs in this country, I think people immediately, and you hear this debate raging on, well, those are computing jobs.
Right, and if we just paid more, there'd be no skills gap.
Jobs in Silicon Valley. Well, you know what? Yes, there's clearly a supply-demand imbalance here in Silicon Valley, trust me. We experience it firsthand. And we'd love to see more qualified candidates either in this country or outside this country who can work in this country and making it easier for them through H-1B programs and so forth. But there's also a lot of jobs for nurses. There are jobs for teachers. There are jobs for cashiers and waiters and waitresses and retail. I mean, you name it. And so I think the better job we can do of identifying where those jobs exist and the skills required to obtain those jobs, the better job we can do equipping people with the skills they need to get those jobs.
Tell me about, on LinkedIn, what's minority representation there, African American, Latino in particular, and I'm sure it's relatively much smaller, and what do you overcome it? And what about women? How do women stack up against men and represent on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so when you talk about on LinkedIn, women are underrepresented in terms of our membership relative to the total population. We're also looking at that in terms of our employee base. As a matter of fact, we just released today our diversity data.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we're not.
What did it say?
We're not where we'd like to be. So with regard to gender, our entire workforce maps very closely the industry. So it's roughly 82%, 18% in terms of technical jobs. And we want and can do better than that. With regard to minorities, for example, African Americans are 2%. And I think it's important when you're looking at this data to always put it into context. So what does that mean? Well, you take a step back and you ask yourself, for a particular minority population, how many computer science grads are graduating with those degrees within a particular ethnicity? And it turns out, with regard to African Americans, that number is closer to 8%. So why does that gap exist? What can we do to close that gap? Which groups can we work with? Organizations like Year Up or Code 2040. Because these folks are out there. There's people out there with these skills. And anything we can do to increase our exposure to qualified people that enables us to be more inclusive and to have a workforce that better represents our membership and the people graduating with those skills is a good thing.
But you have economists in the country insist today there is no skills gap. That's the sort of prevailing, that if there were a skills gap, it would show up in rising wages for the skills that are not available. And we don't see it. That's what they say.
Yeah, so you can start with technology and computing jobs. So going back to Code.org, Hadi recently released some statistics that I think were originally distributed by the Conference Board that stated there are 16 times the number of computing jobs in the state of California as there are computer science graduates in the state of California. 16x. That's pretty clear evidence of a skills gap. And you can pick other categories and drill down, and I think you'll see similar. They may not be as exaggerated, but there's no doubt in my mind. Anecdotally, you can talk to any CEO, you can talk to any head of talent, talent acquisition. They'll tell you the same thing. we've got a lot of available jobs with regard, at least for our industry, and we're having trouble filling them.
Who does the hiring company like to hire? That is when you are hiring talent, besides technical capability, obviously. Programmers have to be able to program. But what kind of skills is LinkedIn looking for now, and has it changed in the last couple of years?
So I would draw a distinction between skills and attributes. And you mentioned technical skills, and there's no doubt that's critical in this day and age, given the role of technology in society. So technology vision, even more so than skills, someone who understands the way in which technology will continue to evolve and shape society, that's an important skill. That's a great, valuable skill to have in this day and age. But it's not enough, because you can understand the way in which technology is evolving, but if you don't understand how to manifest that technology to meet an unmet need in the marketplace, it'll make for intellectual property, or it'll make for a good symposium talk. It won't create much value beyond that. So meeting unmet needs and a strong product sensibility, and how you take that technology and create value for a customer base is absolutely critical. You could have the best product in the world, and if you don't have a sustainable business model, during the late 90s, especially on the consumer web, there was a lot of talk of losing $1 per unit, but making it up on volume, which is not a great business model. And so you need business acumen. So those are 3 skills, and I would add 2 to that. It's like 5-tool baseball players and superstar baseball players. So I also think, in addition to those 3, leadership and the ability to inspire others to achieve shared objectives or evangelize what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you truly have vision, there's going to be a lot of naysayers. There's going to be a lot of skeptics. And so you're going to have to speak with conviction and convince those around you, whether it's investors or employees or whoever, that it's something worth pursuing. And then the last skill is arguably the most important of the 5, and that is resourcefulness. And it's just the ability to get stuff done. Because ultimately you're going to run into obstacles. You're going to hit walls. Every hyper-growth company, all of them, every single one of them has run into walls. And the most resourceful people are those that are going to see the wall and then go over it, go around it, or just go right through it. And I also like those that are resourceful, because they don't have the other 4 skills. They're going to hire people that have them. So those would be 5 skills to keep in mind that I think add a lot of value in this day and age. In terms of attributes, first and foremost at LinkedIn, we're looking for cultural fit, culture and values, which has really emerged as our top competitive advantage. And we're looking for people that are going to fit regardless of whether or not, if they're incredibly talented and have really strong skill base, you oftentimes see in hyper-growth companies that those companies will relax the cultural bar. And they'll say, well, we'll get there, but we can't overlook this talent. We're growing too quickly. We need them. And it's so critical that you have that cultural fit, especially in those early days, because ultimately those people are going to also recruit, and they're going to lead, and they're going to coach. And you want them doing that in a way that's consistent with the kind of company you're trying to build. So I think companies that are on the right path are those that will not relax that cultural fit, no matter how talented the person is. And they're going to say, yeah, they're talented, but they're not a cultural fit, so let's move on to the next candidate. So cultural fit's critical. I think learning curve and just raw intelligence and the ability to learn almost instantaneously, given how dynamic the world is right now, a really steep learning curve. Passion and energy and love of what you do has a tendency to inspire those around you, and that can be a force multiplier. At LinkedIn, compassion and managing compassionately is a core part of who we are. Humor. We like to work with people that don't take themselves too seriously. Changing the world is hard work, so we like to have some laughs along the way. So those are some of the things we look for.
That's great. I'm going to ask people to come up for questions. Before we go to them, Jeff, while people are lining up, we got the microphones. What does the world look like from LinkedIn? What do you learn about China from looking at LinkedIn? What do you learn about Europe? What do you learn about the Arab world? What from looking at all these resumes and all these people linking or not linking, what does it tell you about these other countries?
Well, each region is completely different, and then within the region you can double-click, and many of the countries within those regions are completely different. So you asked about China first, and it wasn't through the site that I learned this. It was through visits to China and spending time with students and entrepreneurs and people who were in the later stages of their career.
And have you opened there? I know
we localized. We've been operating in China since the company was conceived. We've had Chinese members who were using the site in English for the better part of a decade, and then earlier this year, we localized and simplified Chinese, so we're up to about 5 million members there.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of talk about the differences between the two countries, and culture and values and so forth. And one of the things that was most insightful about my last visit there, when we had an opportunity to meet with so many current members and potential members and customers, were the things that were on their minds. Same things that are on the minds of our members all over the world. For students, it's what job am I going to get after I graduate? What should my career path be? Am I going to have the resources to take care of my parents as they continue to get older? What are my friends doing? Am I on a path to keep up with them? I mean, these are the same things that we all think about when we're graduating school. The entrepreneurs, where is the financing going to come from? What does the competitive landscape look like? Are they equipped with the skills and the talent to compete effectively? These are the same things we hear from members all over the world. So that was a really interesting insight. In Europe, it's to some extent what we were talking about earlier. You know, youth-based unemployment period, particularly in some of the Mediterranean countries and the southern European countries. And that is clearly an issue that needs to be addressed. You know, India is the second largest country for LinkedIn anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And you know, you can see and feel the growth and the vibrancy that's taking place there. Brazil is one of our largest countries in the world, and they're hosting the World Cup right now. A bunch of people downstairs who are watching the host country in the game. So it really depends on where in the world you're referring to.
Terrific. Please.
Hello, my name's Laura from the University of California, Merced. And when you were talking about how you didn't have the numbers of minorities that you wanted represented in LinkedIn, I was thinking, you know, if the graduates are a certain number, why not go to the schools and possibly have a class on social networking to help get jobs for graduates? I think that would be one of the most popular classes at the school, and you know, that's kind of higher education, is to help you become employed and have the knowledge. So I was wondering if that was part of any of your plans.
Yeah, thank you for the question and the suggestion. So students are among our fastest growing demographics and certainly one of our most important on a global basis. And so we've been investing heavily in tools to help students. So for example, we have an alumni tool, product, that enables you to go on LinkedIn and see everyone that came before you at a particular school and what they're currently doing, literally all of them if they're on LinkedIn. And you can see what they're currently doing, which companies they work for, how senior they are, the title they have, the geography they're working in, and what they majored in. And then you can see how you know them up to 3 degrees, so you can reach out to them for mentorship and opportunities. And when we started building tools like that, we realized we needed to expand our presence on campus so that the career centers, the administrators, the professors, and the students understood how to take advantage of these tools. So we've been doing that. We haven't gone so far as to think about classes, which, you know, it's funny because right before coming on stage, Tom was just talking about the fact that there's increasing appetite and just demand for people to learn how to take advantage of these brave new world we live in and the tools that are available and the products that are available. And it's so new and happening so quickly. So we might just take you up on that suggestion at some point.
In the class.
All right.
Thank you. Over here.
Ginny Jackson from Dallas. Everyone today has mentioned cultural fit. How do you identify cultural fit? Do you have, you know, questions that you ask, metrics? How do you identify that? Because it is really critical.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So to some extent, it's kind of the holy grail of hiring and recruiting. You know, oftentimes people say, well, isn't LinkedIn going to massively disrupt the recruiting industry and put recruiters out of business? And my response is absolutely not. There's as much art, if not more art, than science to recruiting. It's all about chemistry and fit and feeling certain things. And it's just almost prohibitively difficult to train a machine or a computer to understand that in terms of evaluating a profile to recognize that. And so, of course, the interview is a big part of that. And it starts with understanding what your culture is and what your values are and codifying that. And a lot of companies don't necessarily take the time to do that. But once you've codified it and you understand it and you're reinforcing it at every turn, it begins with the recruiting process. So your recruiters and your hiring managers are keeping their eyes and ears open for people that do fit. And the more you can express to the world what your company is about, the more you're going to attract people for whom they want to be in that environment. So it almost becomes self-selecting. It becomes so much more efficient and effective that way. But you talk about culture and values. You know, I think sometimes when you get engaged in a recruiting process, ego takes over, or getting the deal done takes over. So the recruiter's trying to close the candidate wants the offer. And sometimes it's easy to overlook the fit. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. It's the difference between putting all of your energy into planning for a wedding versus planning for having a successful marriage for the rest of your life. That's all that matters, right? That's all that matters. So understanding what it is the candidate wants, what's their dream, what do they ultimately want to accomplish in their career, and whether or not, speaking for LinkedIn, we can help put them on that path and transform the trajectory of their career path, bring that closer to being a reality for them. See if we have the right role, the right team, the right fit in terms of culture and values. You were asking about what questions do you ask during an interview along those lines. It's a conversation, it's a discussion. I mean, at some point, someone may figure out some really cool technology to be able to evaluate a LinkedIn profile or a resume, or what questions and what answers you look for, and to assess that stuff. But I think a lot of that comes down to intuition and the feeling you get from somebody and looking someone in the eyes. And it's not just the words they say, it's their voice inflection, it's their body language. And over time, we all build up these kind of subconscious algorithms ourselves. I was talking about how difficult it is to train a machine, but you just know. When you've done it long enough, you just know. And you want to make sure the people who are doing the hiring have developed those skill sets and understand your company. And some of our most successful recruiting efforts are where the recruiters don't just work closely with the functional area of our company, they sit with them every day. So our design department, for example, the recruiters sit with them. And we've heard time and time again from designers who are meeting with them, they felt like they were designers, these recruiters, because they understood our business so well. And those are the people you want asking the questions and understanding the answers and ultimately understanding the fit. And then the last thing I would say, and you may have even interviewed some of these folks today, Tom, is there are folks that are beginning to increasingly appreciate the fact it's not just about the traditional measures of whether or not somebody's qualified, the things that we look for, experience, the companies you worked for, the roles you have, the title, the seniority. It's also about things that are much harder to measure in an interview, like resilience or grit or a growth mindset, those kinds of things. I do believe that we're going to get better, all of us collectively as a workforce, at understanding how to assess those skills. And I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of being able to close the skills gap, and also being able to recruit people who otherwise would never be obviously a fit for that job.
Well, Jeff, my intuition was you were going to be perfect for this audience, and I think it was borne out. So thank you very, very much. It was great. Thank you. Sorry.